organization that promotes, records, and supports long-distance swimming in the Cape. Long distance being swims greater than 7.4 kilometers. The organization is over 50 years old, and our records include over 3,000 successful swims. Thank you to all of you attending tonight. There's a lot of local attendees, as well as some international attendees as well. So thank you very much for joining us. We are in Cape Town, South Africa, for those who are new to the Cape Long Distance Swimming Association. We have a diverse audience of members and non-members here. I think most people are long distance swimmers, and so we will be exploring a lot of questions around long distance swimming. For those who aren't members, a reminder, the membership fee is just 300 Rand, and you can sign up on www.cldsa.co.za. For the membership, you get complimentary tickets to our talks, special offers from Orca and Speedo, discounted coaching with Michelle Weber, the social events or events, discounted swims, and officiation of your swim as well. Tonight we have a very special guest. Lynne Cox is an American long-distance open water swimmer, motivational speaker, and author. Over the course of more than 35 years, Lynne accomplished swims, setting world records and opening borders, contributed to medical research, supported environmental issues, and inspired people to overcome great obstacles. She is best known for a swim across the Bering Strait from the United States to the Soviet Union on the 7th of August, 1987. She twice held the overall record for the fastest crossing of the English Channel from England to France. Amongst her other great swims are the Catalina Channel, the first Cape Point swim, the first Antarctic ice mile, and the first woman to complete the Cook Strait, the Magellan Strait, and the first Beagle Channel crossing as well. Welcome, Lynne, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Thomas. This is really fun. I see a few people's faces that I've seen on Facebook or I've seen in real life, so it's really nice to reconnect now.
Well, a great honor for you to join us on our Cold Water Capers. This is, I think, about our 8th Cold Water Capers, so very special to have you joining us. Just to all the listeners, just to talk a little bit about our protocol, I'll be chatting to Lynne for about 30 minutes, we'll see. And during that time, you're welcome to ask questions in the chat area. And during the discussion of 30 minutes, I'll go through some of those questions, and I will be asking select questions at the end of the 30 minutes. So get your questions in. I can't promise you all questions will be asked, but I'll do my best to get through as many as I can, and I will be selecting them. So do ask questions. So then it's so much to talk about, really. I mean, obviously your achievements, your passion, and all the firsts that you've been known for, as well as all the writing that you've done and the motivational talks. Let's start it right at the beginning. How did you get into open water swimming?
My parents were afraid that my brother and my 2 sisters and I would drown. So they decided when we were really, really little to start having us learn to swim. And my mom was a great swimmer. Her dad was an open water swimmer in Maine before open water swimming was really known. And so they got us learning to swim in this place called Snow Pond near Waterville, Maine. And it was a time when the family got together, when we splashed around, where we just played and had fun. And my mom and dad taught us in a way that was really supportive, and you felt secure. My mom or dad would hold one of us and we'd start dog paddling and then pass us off to the other. And then back and forth, we'd be swimming back from mom to dad. And eventually they'd give us less support and we started to swim. So that's how we started. And then we all joined the Manchester swim team, which was an age group swim team in New Hampshire. And we all did pretty well. And my parents decided that, you know, if they really want to excel at the sport, they need to be able to go somewhere where they can train all year round and where the facilities are better than in New Hampshire. So my dad pulled out a map of the United States, and we all decided we wanted to move to California. So when we moved to California, we wound up intentionally going to Long Beach, California area to start training with Don Gambrell, who was at that time the U.S. Olympic coach. And I think he would become the U.S. Olympic coach for 4 different Olympic teams. He had some of the best swimmers in the world swimming in that pool. There were swimmers from all over the world, Australia, South Africa, Europe, that were training. And so that was where I saw what it was like to try to train to be the best, where you could see people day in and day out working really hard and actually see them go on. Like Gary Hall would get the gold medal in the 100 butterfly, and Gunnar Larsson from Sweden would get it in the 400 IM. And so I think I started thinking, well, maybe I could do something like that one day. Maybe this could be my goal. And I was really fortunate because I had a great coach who recognized that there's something special in every one of us, and something special that can be brought out with the right coaching. And he was the one, Don was the one that said, why don't you try swimming in the open water, do a rough water swim off Seal Beach? And I did, and I loved it. I won the women's division at age 14 and came in 3rd in the men's division. So it was exciting as could be. And it was no longer boring. When you swim in the open water, it's always changing. It's always something new from day to day. So I started training and heard about a group of kids that were going to swim Catalina Channel. So I asked if I could train with them. And they said yes. So at age 14, we did the swim from Catalina Island to the mainland. It took us 12 hours and 36 minutes. Andy and Dennis and Nancy and Stacy were the other swimmers I swam with. Nancy had to get out about halfway because of hypothermia, but the other 3 swimmers made it across and decided they never wanted to do anything like that again.
But you didn't.
We were cold. We were cold and tired and hungry. Yeah.
And you didn't. I mean, that was really the beginning for you. So Catalina, for those who don't know, is one of the big Ocean 7, the big 7 swims of the world, and it's just off the coast of California, Catalina Island, and you swim to the mainland. And so that was your big. Your first foray into it, and then obviously at the age, you were a mere teenager at that stage, and the English Channel called.
Right. Actually, when I was 9 years old, mother, Mrs. Milligan, on the swim team in New Hampshire, saw me swimming, and it was raining and cold, and I was the only person in the pool, and she just sort of said, I bet someday you're going to swim the English Channel. And so at 9 years old, that stuck in my head. You know how ideas go into your head when you're a kid or even an adult. I mean, all of you do extraordinary things and you probably spur each other on. So I heard about it. Then I did Catalina. And then I thought, it's the same distance. The water temperature is a little bit warmer, currents in the Catalina Channel. The English Channel is a little rougher, but maybe I could train for it and do it. So I went with the idea of, okay, I'd like to swim the English Channel when I'm 15 years old, and my goal will be to do the fastest swim from England to France. I want to be the fastest woman or the fastest man, just be the fastest, because I had people in the pool that's what they were doing. And so I started training really hard, really hard.
So you were training really hard, and obviously you got over to the UK, and you weren't quite sure how everything worked. So you knew you had to get hold of a swimming pilot or a boat pilot, captain, and tell us a little bit about that, because you stumbled upon a bit of a gem, didn't you?
Yes, actually, when we arrived in England and became members of the English Channel Swimming Association, you were given a list of names of pilots, and there probably are a dozen or so. So we sat down and started calling. And I think it was the 3rd call we made, I connected with a man named Reg Brickle. And it turns out that he was the one who had taken the most record-breaking swimmers across the English Channel. And he was the amazing pilot who wanted everyone to succeed, and he would do everything he could to make that happen. His son, Reg Jr., also was on the boat that day. And now, years and years and years and later, he is a pilot for many of the English Channel swimmers. But because I had Reg, and because I had had great training from Gambrel and training with the team, I set off at midnight from Shakespeare Beach and swam toward France. And it was so funny because I'd never been to France before. So here I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great to make it? Because then we'll at least get to France for a few minutes. And the swim was really difficult because back then they didn't have GPS. They just had radar. So in a straight line, it's 21 miles across the English Channel. But because of the tides and currents and the navigation, my first one would be 30 miles, and I'd set the record, and then my time would be broken by Davis Hart from Springfield, Mass. So the following year I'd go back and I'd swim 33 miles, but still swim about 20 minutes faster. But the pressure was so much because I could have swum the English Channel a second time, and if I hadn't broken the world record, I wouldn't have succeeded. And that was like, I didn't like that. I really didn't like that.
So, I mean, one of the things, and I learned this from your book, we'll talk a little bit about your books later, but, you know, when you started off open water swimming, it was as if, you know, a lot of people start out strong, but you actually end up strong, and you carry on going, and you've got it in you to just, you know, just keep on going. So it was at that point you realized that, you know, open water, long distance swimming was for you. So is that something that stayed with you through your life, that you've always felt strong right the way through the swim from beginning to end, as opposed to starting off strong and then tapering out at the end?
I think so much that came from Don Gambrel's training, because what he but encouraged me to do was to start out strong and then keep building. And when I was doing repeats, instead of doing 10 100-meter repeats, I would do 10 1-mile repeats. And what he would encourage me to do is always to do the 10th mile faster than the first mile, so that it got me ready for the English Channel. Because at the end of a swim, especially in the English Channel, also for the Catalina Channel, the tide's changing, and often people will get swept back out into the middle of the channel. I mean, they just watch the finish line get slowly and slowly further and further away. So because of Gambrel, because of Reg Brickell, because my mom was on the boat cheering me on, and because Mickey Morford, the official observer who was there as well, were just so much encouraging me, I kept sprinting and working so hard at the end. You know, it was interesting because most swimmers will land at that point, they'd land on the beach because it's a sandy beach. But I had choice of going for some rocks where there were waves crashing against the rocks, or going for the beach. And I'm like, we're going for the rocks, you know, because you just, when you put so much into it, you're like, okay, I'll deal with what I have to at that moment. And I got a little scratched up, but it didn't matter. And when we landed, or when I landed, there were 3 people standing on the cape above, and they yelled in French, "Tu nages la Manche? Did you swim the channel?" And I had been practicing all the time. Oui, j'ai nagé la Manche. Yes, I swam the channel. And you heard 3 people clapping. It was like, okay, we made it to France. When you hear the language, you know you've made it.
You know, when people do world firsts and all that, they typically are surrounded by throngs of fans and all that sort of thing. But you know, you breaking the record, just having 3 people on the cliff sounds like a little bit of an anticlimax for such an amazing achievement. So anyway,
it wasn't. I mean, you know that when you do this sport, a lot of times it's very solo. It's very much you doing it, or you and your best friend, or a couple friends, and it's just the journey that's so exciting. But what happened when we got back to England was that it was a huge story to have a 15-year-old break the English Channel record. It was something so unusual. So I was getting telegrams from all over the world. I was getting invitations to see people. I was getting marriage proposals. It was just incredible for a 15-year-old to go, okay, and now I've got to go back and get back into training and go back to high school. So there was this sort of like, okay, back to reality. You know, you can have these big goals, but life continues on in a normal rhythm, which was good. Because, you know, when you've achieved a really big goal for yourself, it's the question is, what do you do next? And I was really, really lucky back then that Davis Hart broke the men's record, which then gave me the desire to go back and try to swim faster.
And yeah, just moving on a little bit. So many don't know that you are a pioneer in South African waters as well, because you were the first person to swim the Cape Point swim, which incidentally has been swum by many people since you. But you know, it was uncharted territory, very much so when you started out. So what brought you to South Africa? This is about 1979 or so.
That's right around the time that I was there. I was really intrigued with the Cape Point swim. I called it Cape of Good Hope at that point, but because nobody had done it. And I knew about these huge waves and about ships getting sunk offshore. And I just thought, well, this makes it really challenging for a human being. Wouldn't it be amazing to swim around the point, to swim from the Atlantic Ocean into the Indian Ocean, and to be able to go out through big surf? And so it was really intriguing, but you know, there was a reason beyond swimming that drew me to South Africa. I just really wanted to see what the country was like, what the people were like, to explore, to see something new. It wasn't just about swimming, it was really more than that. And I wound up meeting some extraordinary people who would take me in and we do a braai. I'm like, what is a braai? I mean, just things you take for granted, and the language was different, and it was so much fun to just hear the voice changes and the accents, and realize I'm the one that had the accent. But I just really enjoyed coming to South Africa and seeing the wild animals, but also really meeting the people.
Well, I mean, it was quite something, your swim, because you know, again, you write about it, but not only was it the wild waves and all that, but it was also a bit of wildlife that almost got in the way right at the end of the swim.
Actually, I had Hugh Tucker along on the swim, and Alex, whose last name I can't remember right now, who's with the Cape Town Police. And then there were a group of special forces, basically, from the Cape Town Police Department that were spotting the water. And when we were about 400 meters from finishing, a 12-foot bronze whaler, a migratory shark that comes down from the Red Sea at that time of year, just came up out of the water toward me. And Doug saw the shark and he shot it with a spear gun, hit it in the dorsal fin, and it turned and he pulled the spear out of its fin, and then the shark swam on. But there was water with blood in it, and their people on the boat were really concerned that more sharks would come in very quickly. So Hugh and another swimmer jumped in the water with me and swam the last part of the swim to shore. And they were encouraging me to swim really fast, but I did not need any encouragement.
And I mean, I think your seminal swim, very much so, is the Bering Strait swim. For those who don't know, there's a swim between two islands, the Diomede Islands. One is owned by the US, one was owned by the Soviet Union, now Russia. And obviously a very important time in those days, 1987. So very much still coming towards the end of the Cold War. Well, has it ended? It's another question for another time. But we're talking about what? It was about a 3-kilometer swim, or was it a 3-mile swim, and 3-kilometer swim, I think, in very, very cold water. But what persuaded you to go and do that swim?
Well, that swim was really about trying to open the border between the US and Soviet Union and promote peace. That was the main reason for doing it. It was also to show that the US and Soviet Union were only 2.7 miles apart, and that we were neighbors. The superpowers were neighbors. It wasn't a relationship between Washington, D.C. and Moscow. It was a relationship between we could see each other. We could see, you know, when you stand on Little Diomede Island and you look across to the west, you can see Big Diomede, and you can actually see people on the island. At that time, when I was going to do the swim, it was just military, because the people who had lived on Big Diomede had been moved to mainland Siberia. And there were families that lived on Little Diomede that were Inuit families. So to do the swim, I really relied on the local Inuit to help me do the swim. And they had umiaks, which were long walrus-skin boats. And they were my guides, as well as I had 2 doctors on board to make sure I'd be safe during the swim. And there were people on board that were watching the water for walrus, because they could be very dangerous. So it was a very exciting swim, because it took 11 years to get permission. And when I finally got permission, it was during the time Glasnost was going on, and something that Gorbachev was really pushing. And so it really connected with the Americans and with the Soviets at that time. And the border did open, and the swim was successful. And it changed the relationship, because people were able to go back and forth between the 2 countries. There were airline flights on Alaska Airlines. They could fly from the west coast of the United States to the Soviet Far East. There was a land bridge park that was created. So people saw that happening. And then after that, I was contacted by swimmers, mostly in Germany, who said that that swim across the Bering Strait influenced the Berlin Wall coming down. That once they saw the opening in what was known as the ice curtain, people realized that other things could happen too. So before that happened, though, I had gone to Germany to try to get permission to swim from East Berlin to West Berlin, where the wall was. And I had to go to the Soviets, the French, the English, and the Americans to get permission, and had that in play, starting to have it all come together. And then the wall came down. So instead of just canceling it, I decided, well, do this one anyway, because it celebrates this opening. But the crazy thing about it was that I had to have support from the East Berlin Police Department, the Stasi, the secret police, because the river, the Spree River, had been mined, and it was full of razor wire. And so they were the ones that had it all mapped out. So I had to make sure that I stayed very close to them, along with the West German boat support, to make sure that I didn't run into a mine. And so together, though, with the East and West Berlin police departments, I was able to do the swim, which was really fabulous. Because again, it's, you know, it's just one idea, one person then being able to convince other people, like you convince your friends to come along and swim with you and do these wild things. And then you decide you want to do a certain goal, and then you build on that goal. That was what I was doing too.
That's absolutely incredible. I mean, most people are doing, you know, swimming for an individual goal, a group goal, and all that. But I mean, this was almost so much greater than just you achieving a little crossing like we all try and achieve. You know, this was and obviously the motivation to get you going for 11 years. I mean, that was something else. Just writing to all the officials that you could, just to see, and almost the last minute you were in a position where you may not have been able to do the swim. So it was incredible that it all came together at the end. Sorry, I'm talking again about the Diomede swim. So yeah, I mean, swimming for political reasons is incredible. A lot of this is all contained in some of your books that you've written, or at least one specific book. I'm just going to share just share something which has some of your books that some of the listeners will be aware of, some not. So that Swimming to Antarctica contains a whole list of anecdotes and interesting stories, and I mean, it's been a bestseller many times. So an incredible read, I think, for any swimmer, reading about what motivates you and what's got you to do one incredible performance after another. We're going to move on shortly onto the book Tales of Al, which is your latest book. But can you give us a little bit of an introduction to some of the other books that you have there?
Actually, after I wrote Swimming to Antarctica, I decided that I would write the story about Grayson, which is about a baby whale that got lost off the coast of California while I was training to swim Catalina the second time. And it's really a story that's happy and joyful. It's about this baby whale that swims with me for hours as we try to find her mom. Turns out that lifeguards and the fishermen and people on board other boats and on the pier are all searching for his mom. That story has been translated now into 23 different languages. And actually, the book that says The Day the Whale Came, that's the British translation, because the book was called Grayson in England, but there was a book that came out at the same time by a transvestite, and they were afraid that people in England would be confused by the title of the story about the whale and about the story of the man. So they changed the title, which I thought was really funny, but whatever, it worked. Swimming in the sink is about my getting very sick in life after many losses and losing my mom, my dad, my dog, the neighborhood, all sorts of things. And then using what I'd learned as an athlete to come back and recover and start life again. Elizabeth, Queen of the Sea is a true story about a sea elephant that lived in Christchurch, New Zealand, that chose to live in the Avon River in the town. And she was a celebrity. The problem, though, is that people thought she shouldn't be living there, that she should live in the rookery where all the other elephants lived, sea elephants lived. So they wound up towing her out to sea, and she kept coming back. So it's also a very happy story. South of the Sun is about Amundsen, who was one of my heroes. He was the first man to reach the South Pole. And I just really wanted to see what his method was for doing that. And I remember acclimating in 40-degree temperatures Fahrenheit to train for some of the swims. And he was training in minus 40 degrees C to train for going to Antarctica. I wrote the open water swimming manual as a way to help people getting into the sport to know what to do, to know about safety, to know about how much fun it is, to find crew for your support swims, to do things that you dream of, and also to explain how you go about finding people that are qualified to watch you when you're doing a swim, and how you figure out how to do the swim. And then this recent book is something totally new, but also has that thread of challenge and courage and love and faith.
So most of us swim either alone or we swim with friends and swim regularly, and it's quite a social sport here in Cape Town, for example, and many places around the world. But I don't know how many Cape Townians have ever considered swimming with their dog. And of course, this swimmer, this little story, that dog over there, I think is a Newfoundland dog, and they are actually incredible swimmers. Just to let you know, for those who are questioning whether dogs can actually swim any distance, the world record is 9.5 miles, which is way longer than a Robben Island crossing. So dogs can swim a long way, and certain breeds obviously are better than others. So I mean, what makes these Newfoundland dogs so brilliant at swimming?
Well, they were bred to be dogs that pulled in the lines for fishermen. They have huge mouths and big teeth, and they also have loose lips. And so they were able to grab onto the lines and breathe while they were pulling these fishing lines in. They've got huge paws that are webbed, and they know how to pace themselves. So the dogs did this with the fishermen, and they also pulled the fishing carts, very strong, powerful animals. There's a school in Italy called the Scuola Italiana Cani Salvataggio, Italian School for Water Rescue Dogs. And I had heard about them and saw a video clip online about the dogs leaping out of helicopters into the lake, some of the lakes in Italy, and decided I needed to go there to see how they train, because I just thought, how do they get the dog to jump out of the water, jump into the water when they're that high off the water? How do they train for this? And how do they, the loud noise of the helicopter and the wind that you get onto the water where it makes it so rough, how do they swim through this? And so I was so curious and reached out through all sorts of contacts I'd learned how to do this from the swims that I did in the past, and connected with Donna Pasquale, who was vice president of the school. And she invited me to come to Italy, to the school near Milan, to watch them train the dogs. And it wasn't just Newfoundlands. There were also Labradors and Golden Retrievers and German Shepherds and Leonbergers and Italian Spinoni. The Italian Spinonis were dogs that were primarily gun dogs. They were used for hunting in Italy, but they discovered that the Italian Spinoni also loved the water. So they trained with these dogs every single day from spring all the way through fall in the lakes. And they worked just like we would on a swim team or in the open water. The younger swimmers, the younger puppies would go only short distances, or they would just learn to swim. And then as they progressed, they would then work on sort of intermediate swimming techniques. And then the older ones or the better, more smarter ones would start doing the more elite workouts. And there were a couple of Newfoundlands I heard that were able to swim like a mile. And the owners were trained as lifeguards as well, and they would have to swim the mile with the dog. So it was this incredible bond that you saw that was created between the owner or also an instructor and the dog. And each dog, like each person, like each child, is very different. And the cool thing is, if you've been on teams before, connect with friends, you often help each other out and help them learn or work on the backstroke or do something they are having a hard time with. You demonstrate. Well, with the dog school, water rescue dog school, they would have the better students teaching the younger ones what to do. And that was something I hadn't expected at all, where you could see dogs training dogs. But also, if Thomas, you had a Labrador and I had a Golden Retriever, and you were able to teach your Labrador to do something, and I wasn't able to do that with my Golden Retriever, we'd swap dogs. And then you would work with the dog and probably be able to help it do what it needed to do. The other thing is, when they did these water rescue training technique things, they would have the dogs rescuing different people. So they get used to doing that in training, so that they realized that different people would react differently to the dog, and the dog would then respond. One of the coolest things I got to do was to be told, okay, you can do one of the mock rescues. When we did that, I had to put on this life vest that made me super, super buoyant in the water. I swam about 50 meters offshore. And then Ferruccio Palenga, who was the man who had the idea for the school, the president of the school, released his black Newfoundland Mass. And she swam right out to me, but she didn't get close. She did this wide circle. And as she did this wide circle, she'd watched me the whole time. She was making sure that I wasn't terrified of dogs, or that I didn't culturally hate dogs, because in some cultures you're told dogs are taboo. So she saw that I was looking at her. So she swam a second circle around me and let me grab onto the handhold on her harness. And then she just pulled me right ashore, which again was just like, how much fun was that? You know, it was just so good, you know, just to have this free ride to shore. And then we did it again. And I tested her because I just wanted to see what would happen. So I let go of the harness, and she immediately circled me in close and had me grab on again. And then we did it just before we get to shore. I did it again. And she looked at me like she was so annoyed with me, like, you need to hold on to the harness. So I held on and she pulled me into shore. And I really thought about, you know, how do you train a dog to do this? You know, this is not a little thing. This is not just like, go, let me throw a tennis ball for you and you go after it. It was all these different skills. And so I get a chance to watch them use a line where the dogs had to go after the line and pull the line in. I watched them where they worked with just teaching the dogs how to get their arms and legs coordinated, so they were swimming, and had a chance to watch some of the more mature dogs and owners swimming longer distance with them, because they had to be in shape too.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. And yeah, your book is available. I think it's been released in the last couple of days. And I think you can the sort of inventiveness of us South Africans. We can find it, I think, on Amazon. So have a look, have a search around, you'll find it. So that's yeah, a great read. Very, very fascinating story. I mean, particularly that, you know, the use of them in rescue. I think all of us have been out in the cold water, and it can be quite daunting if somebody gets into trouble. What do you do as a swimmer to pull that person to shore? But to have a dog be able to pull the person to shore must be no mean feat. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to move on to some questions. So thank you for those who've asked some questions. We've got a variety of questions, so thank you very much for that. Yeah, Lynne, I mean, these days you're still swimming a bit, and the question here is, what sort of distances were you usually training? For example, a Catalina channel or an English channel. What sort of distances were you training weekly?
I varied my training. So I would often do a 5 mile. Sorry, I should convert to kilometers, but hopefully you can do that.
It's fine. We'll, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. So I would do a 5, 6, 7, 8, and then maybe a 10. And then I'd back down a little bit and maybe to a 4. So I never did consistently like 8 miles every day. I would work on different things. So if I was doing an 8-mile swim today, then tomorrow I might do a 5 mile. 5 was my base where I wouldn't really drop below that. So I do a 5 mile and then build up to 10, then come back down to maybe a 6, and then go back up again. So I was doing a variety of distances and also working on different things. So if I did a 6-mile swim, I would do a lot more repetition, more sprinting to imitate having to go through a current. If I was doing a 10-mile swim, I would work primarily on trying to make the 10th mile faster than the first mile, but it would be a gradual faster and faster through time. And now when I'm swimming, well, wherever. I'm on this 44 event book tour. So I'm swimming wherever I can find water. So today I was just in the water for about an hour in the bay near my house. Tomorrow I'll be able to do that. The next day it'll be a swimming pool. And all I can allow right now is maybe an hour and a half. During the summertime, I'll be back up to an hour and a half or 2 hours a day, just because it's great exercise. I have friends that I do it with, but also I'm spending a lot of time thinking about what I'm writing when I'm swimming. And a big part of being able to write is having thinking time that's uninterrupted. And so there's a great merging of the two things between swimming and thinking, as you probably get the same thing from what you do, right?
Yeah, quite right. Yeah, we've got a double header of a question here. So in terms of your goals, firstly, do you find yourself doubting that you will reach a goal? And secondly, if you don't reach a goal, how do you overcome the disappointment?
Those are great questions. I don't go into a swim doubting my ability. I usually train much more than I need to. So that before I did the Catalina Channel swim, before I did the English Channel swim, I had done 15-mile swims with the idea that I would be doing the English Channel at 21. So I felt like I was always really prepared. And often there were days where I didn't feel like working out, but I pushed myself to go and do the workout, which was really important. So I could think back on that and go, I did the distance. But there were also days where I really didn't feel like going. And I'm like, am I being lazy or am I just really tired? And then if I thought I'm really tired, then I need to back off, because if I get sick, then I'm going to be out for 3 or 4 or 10 days. So that makes no sense at all. So in the routines, the workouts I've done all my years, I've always had at least 1 day off a week, just to get my mind into something else, just to be with different people, just to do something different. So I think that balance is really important. So I always went in with the idea that I could do a swim. I didn't know if I could, because if I knew I could, then there's no adventure in it. There's no wonderful thing that if you figure it out and do it. But I always felt confident I could do it. When I did the Antarctica swim, I was worried because I knew that there's a possibility that I could dive in and go into cardiac arrest. I had trained in 38-degree Fahrenheit and the water was 32. But to make sure that I was okay, I did a test swim before the actual swim that was 9/10 of a mile. And I also had 3 doctors on board that were my doctor friends, plus the ship's doctor watching over to me to make sure I was okay. There was one swim after I met Grayson, the whale. During that period of time, I decided to go back at age 17 and try to break the world record for the Catalina Channel swim. I got lost in the fog at midnight. So the air, the sky, the water was totally black, got separated from my support boat and from the rowboat. And all I could sort of make out was the paddleboard and the coach next to me, who was a pool coach who had no experience in the open water. So I was told by Pat, the paddler, to keep going. And I knew that that was a huge mistake, because if we did that, we'd get even more lost. The crew on board the boat that was looking for us, it would be more difficult for them to find us. So I disqualified myself. And I was so scared after that swim that I never wanted to swim again. I was done. It was over. I just thought, I've had it. I'm done. This is not worth it. And fortunately, I had a friend named Fami Atala who had attempted the English Channel 4 times and got within 400 meters of shore. And his crew thought he was in hypothermia and pulled him out of the water after swimming for 24 hours breaststroke with his head up. So Fami was a psychologist. He was a school psychologist. I met him when I was training for the English Channel the first time. Fami talked to me after this attempt to swim Catalina and said, you have to go back and do it. It will bother you all the rest of your life if you don't do it. Do it now, and that'll be great. And then you can hang up your swimsuit if you want. You've trained so hard. So he pushed me. My parents pushed me for the first time in my life, not just supported, but you got to do it. So I went back to do it, and I started from the mainland and swam to the island. And I did it with the idea of breaking the world record. I think in the back of my mind, it bothered me because my brother had the record from the island to the mainland, and I didn't really want to break his time. So I went from the mainland toward the island and had doubts throughout the swim, where the crew had to keep encouraging me to keep going. And finally, I reached shore and made it in 8 hours and 48 minutes. So my first swim had been 12 hours, 36 with a group of kids. And when I did the second swim, I broke the record, 8 hours and 48 minutes. And so they were right. I was really so lucky to have that support. And that at age 17, I went on to do other things like Cape Point and the Strait of Magellan and all these other things that would not have happened had I stopped at age 17. Long answer, sorry.
No, that's all fascinating. Thank you very, very much. And yeah, I mean, I do want to take this point just to thank you very much for your time and your passion and the inspiration that you give all of us. I haven't even got into ice swimming. I mean, I love ice swimming, and it's so incredible again that you were the pioneer really of doing what you did. So yeah, maybe another time, but I think I just want to conclude with this last question. Thanks, Carola. What challenge is teasing you now? We generally ask this of our swimmer guests. So what challenge, it doesn't need to be a swimming challenge. Maybe it isn't a swimming challenge. I don't know. But what challenge is teasing you now?
The challenge that's teasing me right now is this book tour that I'm doing. I am so glad I've been trained as an endurance athlete, because I'm going to be going to Santa Barbara, San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, New York, I just took all over the country, and I'm St. Paul, Minnesota, the Berkshire Mountains. It just is all over the map. And so I'm really, really, really excited about it, because I'll get to see swimming friends that I've known for years, but I'll also meet people that are just starting out, and I'll also meet dog people who absolutely adore dogs, and they are just as enthusiastic as our swimming group here. You know, it's really fantastic to meet people that are doing stuff in the world, and they're doing positive stuff. And I can't wait to continue this tour that I started 4 days ago, I think, and have 44 more to go.
All right, Lynn. Well, thank you very much, and very good luck to you for your book tour. I think rather you than me. I think it's quite daunting to look at 44 days like that. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to the audience as well. Thank you for your questions. Sorry I didn't get to all of them. Yeah, thanks. This has been Cold Water Capers. Thanks to the producer, Manine Murray, for also arranging everything behind the scenes. I really, really appreciate it. And we'll be back again in the not too distant future. Thank you very, very much, Lynn.
Thank you. And thank you all very much. This was really fun.
Great.